life. And I call myself a peace of mind guide because, believe it or not, talking about these things really does bring peace of mind. So just a little bit before we get into our topic today, why should we plan ahead? Well, it's a good idea to have things in place for incapacitation as well as actual death. You never know when a car accident might happen or you come down with some unknown disease. It's good to have plans in place so that others can take over things for you. If you do it now while you're healthy, you get to make the decisions. That gives you a much better chance of having those decisions followed, having people know what your wishes are, and not having treatments that you definitely don't want. So let's start while you're healthy, while you can make these decisions, while you're physically and mentally capable. And what's the benefit? You get to live your life more fully now. When we are aware of the reality of our mortality, it really gives us an appreciation for just even the little things that we get to do in this body in this time. So my program, the End of Life Peace Plan, covers the heart, soul, and mind of end of life planning. And I'll tell you how to find out more about that at the end. So our topic today is VSED, or voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And I have to tell you, the first time I heard about this, I was just shocked that this was possible, that somebody would consider doing this. The person who was considering it was my dad, and I'll share more about his story as we go through this presentation. But it is definitely an option, and let's dive right in. So in my program, I start with values. This is the basis for all the decisions you're going to make. So some examples are family, justice. Oops, I see there's an E missing there. Adventure. Now that might be something for you to make decisions on. The one that comes up for VSED is the quality or the value of self-determination, the right to choose for yourself. Modern medicine is amazing. I have no problems with that. I've had several life-saving surgeries, and they've definitely extended my life. And I have the quality of life still that I want. But in some cases, medicine can't do anything for you, or it would just prolong the misery that somebody is living in. So there are times when it's great, and there's times when it's no longer really the best option. So what exactly is VSED, or voluntarily stopping eating and drinking? Well, it's basically stopping all intake of both food and water. You can live on just liquid for 3 to 4 months, believe it or not. But once you stop both, the kidneys shut down. They can't function anymore if there's no liquid coming into the body. And it is a natural process. And believe it or not, organs know when it's time to shut down. And so the kidneys might stop first, and then lungs, and then heart. It's all part of the process. And so it's what used to happen. People would have a diagnosis or not know why they were ill, and they'd be at home, they'd be loved ones around, they'd just stop wanting to take in food and water. Now that goes completely against our culture, right? Food is love. That's how we express our care and our feelings for people. So it can be really, really hard to accept that somebody wants to stop eating and drinking. And that's why these conversations way ahead of time are so important. My father actually started talking about it about 6 years before he wanted to do it. He was ready to do it. At first, I was, like I said, just like, I don't think so. I don't even want to hear about that. My mom had died several years earlier, and so still grieving her very difficult end of life. And so it was just awful to consider losing my other beloved parent. So if you are considering this, I highly recommend that you start researching and discussing it with those who are going to be around you. And I am here to help with that. So is it legal? Yes, it's enshrined actually in the 14th Amendment that we all have the right to refuse medical treatment, and food and water can be considered medical treatment if you think of feeding tubes and intubation and IV. You can refuse to have that, so why not be able to refuse hand feeding or being forced to eat yourself, ending up drinking Ensure cans, that's not exactly a great quality of life. It's also legal in all Canadian provinces and territories. So what happens with the death certificate? Usually it will say something like cardiac arrest or maybe the underlying disease. It is not considered suicide. It will not say that on a death certificate. So you don't need to worry about it being considered suicide. Family members may think differently, but again, the conversations ahead of time really do matter in that situation. You definitely want to be on hospice when you're choosing to do VSED. And some may or may not support VSED for non-terminal patients, and we'll talk about what those cases might be. They will support it if you are, within the 6 months or less to live. So we'll cover that too. Okay, so there are two scenarios where you might want to choose this option. One is the end of your natural lifespan. That was my dad's case. He was 86. He had done the values worksheet from End of Life Washington, so he knew what quality of life meant to him. Originally, he had said, if I'm ever in a wheelchair, that's it, I'm done. But he was in assisted living the last year of his life. He actually kind of thrived in a wheelchair. He was not in as much pain. He was still able to get out and wheel himself around, going around the parking lot every day. He could still get in and out of cars. And so he was able to go do things with me and my sisters. And then he started having more falls, unable to transfer in and out of bed to the wheelchair on his own. All those activities of daily living, couldn't dress himself. He also had some Parkinson's and some memory issues. So he decided at 86 that it was the right time to start. The other scenario is when medical aid in dying is not accessible. So that would be like death with dignity. Some people call it physician-assisted suicide. I don't like that term because the person actually has to take the medication themselves. The physician is nowhere near at the actual time of death. But that's only legal in 10 US states and the District of Columbia, and also all over Canada. So if you have a condition like ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, or severe Parkinson's, something serious, but not necessarily life-ending, something you could live with for many years, VSED might be a good option. And then also in the case of dementia, it does require putting a dementia directive in place in advance. And that's definitely one of the things that we talk about in my end-of-life peace plan. So first, let's talk about the process of just natural end of life. So like I said, organs wear out. In my father's case, his heart was getting weak. He didn't have any breathing problems, or he did have high blood pressure and cholesterol, but his quality of life was what really made it the right time for him to do that. So if you're completely unable to take care of yourself, you're dependent on others for feeding and toileting and getting out of bed, that might be the right time to do this. You might be in significant pain that's not treatable, or it's only treatable with opioids or morphine, something that's going to make you kind of lose consciousness anyway. You might have further treatment available, but all that would do would postpone death and not really prolong life with any quality. And so with my dad, he had been talking about it for years, as I said, and so we knew all of the details. We'd done the research. I'll give you those resources at the end. The key was that he started talking about wanting to go home. He was wandering around the facility, not knowing where he was. He'd have times of lucidity and then times where he just wasn't making any sense to me at all. And I had taken over his medical power of attorney by then, his financial power of attorney. And so we talked about it and he said, yeah, this is the time, this is it. So he started on he had dinner on a Friday night, had chocolate cake for dessert. And the next day he just refused to eat anymore. My sisters and I were able to support him during the day. He had the caregivers at the assisted living place with him at night. For him, it only took a week. That's short for doing this process, but he was already, on the down slide to his end of life. So yeah, we were with him the first 3 days or so. He was conscious, but he was getting morphine and Ativan for anxiety, and then pretty much went into a coma for the last few days. And as far as I know, his death was quite peaceful. I was not there at the time he took his last breath. That was like 3:30 in the morning, and he didn't want us there at night. So he was an introvert. I think he chose that time to go out. So the first steps, if you're at the end of your life, if you're not already on hospice, get a referral to hospice. You might need to get that from your physician. You might have to call around to find one that can take you. If there's more than one in your area, definitely get recommendations, shop around, make sure that they are willing to support the VSED process. They'll take care of all the medications, the hospital bed. They'll give you the swabs and the lip balm and so on, and help you be present, know how to take care of the person. They don't provide a lot of actual hands-on care, so you will need to have somebody there. So if you're at home, you can set up in a calm space, clear things that would remind the person of, like wouldn't want to have food or water, even any kind of coffee smells like that in the room. It's great to have a door to the room so that people can come in and out, and you get to decide, do you want people visiting, or do you want to just have music playing, or do you want people telling stories and laughing? It's really up to you to decide that. If you're in assisted living, you can work with the staff there to make sure that they are supportive of that and can provide the kind of care that the person needs, so that you can be more of your loved ones can be more your daughter, your spouse, your son, your friend, and they don't have to necessarily do all of the personal care. So if you are in the second scenario where you're ready to go, but you don't have the diagnosis, that could be, again, early onset dementia. You might have family history, although these days they are finding that it's not necessarily hereditary, some forms of dementia. And so sleeping well, eating a good diet, staying mentally and physically active can actually do a lot to postpone the onset of dementia. Maybe you have a debilitating diagnosis, but don't qualify for hospice or that medical aid in dying, or you don't have access to it. Oregon and Vermont now allow non-residents to come into the state, but it's still a major process to go through. You have to be there for probably about a month, because you have to make the appointment with the doctor, make another one 2 weeks later, get the medications actually in hand, and then have a place to do all that and have the support to do all that. So it's not easy to take advantage of that new legislation that says out-of-state people can access it. And then the last one, you could receive more treatment, but again, like I said, that just would prolong, postpone death and not really give you the quality of life. So in this case, you want to avoid any legal issues. So you want to have a great team around you, family, friends, caregivers. You might want an end-of-life doula. You might know about birth doulas. Well, now there are death doulas or end-of-life doulas, and they can really help set up that sacred space, manage the coming and going, and let the family members just be there as in that role. You'll want to get release of liability forms notarized, and it's also good to make a video or two, one to remind yourself why you're doing this, and then one for others so that they can see that you are clear-minded when you decided to start. And definitely research hospices to find one that supports VSED, because you can't get on hospice right away if you don't have that 6 months or less to live diagnosis. So finding one that will accept you after 2 to 3 days is key, because then they'll bring over all of the equipment that you need, the medications. They'll have the nurse start visiting, and social worker to help the family if there's any curiosity about spiritual matters. They have a chaplain who's non-denominational, and they can help with talking about sort of soul issues. And so, yeah, you have to start the process without hospice in place, but they'll come on board soon. And, if you're doing this when you are relatively healthy, it will take longer. But the first few days, you may even be able to get up out of bed. So these are the key preparations for that scenario. So you want to decide when you're going to start and get that caregiver team in place, hire an end of life doula. If you're on Bainbridge Island, we have a new organization, a collective called Edge Walking, and we are supporting people through this process. So we have the doula, we have some caregivers, we have vigil sitters, and in this case, it might be up to as many as 3 weeks. So you want to make sure the hospice nurse shows you how to care for the dying person. Think about how you want to handle visitors, and remember, hearing is the last sense to go. So you want to really be mindful of what conversations are taking place in the room. If you're talking about the patient, take it out of the room, because you never know what they're going to be able to understand. It's a great time to share positive memories, tell stories, but also to cry, and probably not to, ask for some sort of release, or ask them to admit things. They're doing this process internally. This life review is going on, and if you're curious about that, there are some end of life or hospice nurses on Instagram and TikTok. Hospice nurse Julie, hospice nurse Penny, and nurse Hadley. And I find their reels just really interesting to watch, very informative about so many different aspects of hospice. So for both the end of life, natural end of life, and choosing to start beforehand, the actual process is basically stop food and liquid intake. Others will pay attention to keeping your mouth moist with swabs, lip balm, or spritzing water in. You don't want to have any intake of liquid, even ice chips or sips of water. That will definitely postpone and prolong the process. At the beginning, you may be active with support, may be able to get out of bed, but at some point you will be bedbound. You'll be on these medications that will manage that pain and anxiety. If you're at home, those supporting you there will have it. If you're in assisted living, you have to work with the med tech. We had some issues with that at the beginning for my dad. They didn't want to give him morphine as often as he needed it, but we were very strong and determined to help him not be in any pain. If you have made a video, you can rewatch it. If you're trying to second guess yourself, it's really hard to come back once you've been into the process a couple of days. It's not easy. So once you be very sure that you want to start. And so the actual process is so amazing. These nurses, if you watch their videos, they talk about seeing visions, people seeing visions, having common to look up in the corner of the room and see something. There might be flashes of light. Who knows? The veil is very, very thin at times like this. And in my dad's case, we had put a picture of his dad and my mom, who'd already passed, up on the wall. And my mom's picture kept falling off. It would not stay on the wall. And so who knows, was she present, showing us that she was present there, knocking her own picture off? That was consistent with her personality. So eventually then you go into a coma, and then breathing will cease, and that's the end. So that was a lot to hear and take in. Let's just pause for a minute and take a deep breath in, blow it out, let your shoulders drop, maybe brush your arms off, shake your hands. Yeah, we're talking about really weighty topics here. And I really appreciate your presence, your willingness to engage in this. And it's such an important thing to consider. You know, we spend a lot of time celebrating births, other transitions, but somehow in our dominant white culture, death has become the one thing we don't really talk about. So I'm here to change that. So here are some useful resources. Again, if you're on Bainbridge Island, you can go to our website for edge walking and learn about the resources we have available there. There's a great group in Bellingham, Washington called VSED Resources, and their website is so informative. They've published a book called the VSED Handbook, and that goes into detail. There's so much more information now available online. My sisters and I made great use of this woman, Phyllis Schachter's information. She has a website and also a TED Talk, Not Here by Choice, talking about her husband's choice to stop ending in his life with VSED. And then I just watched this movie called The Last Ecstatic Days. And this is about a younger man, 38, 39, who had brain cancer and had had lots of treatments for it and just decided that was it. And he didn't have a place to go. So he put out a call, and he was in the Ashland, North Carolina area, and he wanted the whole last part of his life filmed and recorded for other people to be able to benefit from. Such a huge gift. So you can look that up online. There are lots of online screenings of that, and maybe we'll bring it to this group. So thank you again for being with me in this tender time. Again, my program is called the End of Life Peace Plan. You can find out more about that at my website, johannamunson.com. And I have a Facebook group, End of Life Lounge. So if you're on Facebook, feel free to ask to join that. And this is my passion. This is the way I make my living, is to talk about end of life issues and to help people put their own plans in place. So if you feel called to make a donation, there's my Venmo information. And if you are on Bainbridge Island and you don't use Venmo, just text me or message me and email me. We'll get in touch. It would be an honor. Thank you so much again for spending this time with me. Planning brings peace, and that is my wish for you.